So, hope everyone is having a good Thursday wherever you are in the world. My name is Sarah Fairclough, and I'm a member of the Platform Solutions team here at SmartSimple. Today, I'm joined with a couple of my team members who are going to be doing a webinar about some of the reports you can find within SmartSimple. They're going to be giving an overview of disbursement reports and payment forecasting reports. So, just before Garrett starts, couple housekeeping items. We love to hear your questions. We will be doing a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to post your questions throughout and we'll do our best to answer all of them. As well, the session is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube page. It just takes about a week to get everything edited and uploaded, and a copy will be sent to your emails if you've registered. So now, without further ado, I will pass it over to Garrett. Thanks, Garrett.
Sure thing. Thank you. Alrighty, I have shared my screen here. Hi, everyone. My name is Garrett Alford. I'm a Platform Solutions Manager here at SmartSimple, and today I'm going to be showing you a little bit about our disbursement report here. So what is a disbursement report? Well, it's a nice financial report that can show you sort of a nice bird's eye view of your payments and your disbursements. Let's have a look at what that could look like. So we'll preview this report here. And as you can see, we have a nice summary of payments here. We have included the application name that each of these payments is coming from, a payment ID, a status for that payment, and a payment date as well. You'll see we have payment amounts, statuses for disbursements, and we have some totals as well. So you'll see we have a nice grand total here at the bottom, and we have a total group by per fund. So you'll see that each of these groups of payments is actually grouped by the fund that this payment is going to be allocated to. So that's super useful if you have a budget or a fund manager. I would definitely recommend that we create a disbursement report to show these payments and these disbursements and how they're related to the applications as well as the funds. So why use reports in SmartSimple? A quick little answer to that is if you'd like to sort of query your data across multiple modules, I would recommend building a report. So let's look at actually building this particular report that I've shown. And to do so, of course, we've got to navigate to reports. So I'll just show you from scratch how we can navigate to reports. We're going to open our configuration menu. And beneath this tools header, we are going to select the reports link. And here you'll be taken to a list of your reports. And of course, we have different report categories, so you can always filter by category. I can add a new report with this new report button, which is signified by this plus button here. In my particular scenario, I'm just going to show you how I've built this disbursement report. So let's go ahead and edit that. And when you're creating a report like this, of course, you're going to give it a name, you're going to give it a description, a category as well for some nice categorization. But from there, what we're going to do is we're going to open up our report builder. So when we open our report builder here, you'll see that we have data sets to select from, and then we have the fields that we can then use for each of the columns of our report. So you'll see that we have 10 columns in this particular report. If you'd like to add more, of course, you could add more columns or omit some of the columns that we have in this particular example. Let's look at the data sets. We've got applications. Since we will be sort of querying the data from our applications, we want to show that application name like what we saw on the disbursement report there. We also have our data set 2, which is our activities. That contains our payments. So we will be showing those payments in the report. Therefore, we've got that as our data set 2. We've got the disbursements. Those are the level 3s in our application or submission manager. And then we also have the funds, which are, in our case, a level 2 on a budget or fund manager. So let's talk through each of these columns here. We have our application name from our application. We're going to include that as a displayed column. Next, we're going to select from our data set 2 our activities, and we are going to filter the type to just see the payments. So in this criteria row, you'll see that we have equals payment in quotation marks here, and that is just set so that we can only see payments listed on this particular report, not our other level 2 types, like perhaps we might have some reports like progress reports or final reports as level 2 types or whatever other level 2s you have. Here we are just filtering this so we can see the payments, and you'll notice that the display is actually turned off for this column since it's just a filter. Next, we have the payment ID, and we will be displaying that. We have the status, and we will also be filtering this by just this payments that are in paid status here. We also are going to show the paid date for the payments. And next, we are going to have the payment amount. You'll see here in our group options, we have selected total by sum, and that's going to give us a nice sum aggregate for these payments and these payment amounts. Next, we are going to display the status of the disbursements. So we have the status of the payments and the disbursements being shown on this report. And then on the 8th column here, we have linked budget. So we are actually showing or not showing this particular column, excuse me. This is actually just simply linking to those funds so that we can have our total group buy for those funds. So that leads me to the next column here. You'll see on column 9, we have fund name, and this is from, of course, data set 4, funds. And we have, for our group options at this particular column, we have our total group buy enabled. Now that's what we see in that report when we see those headers are all representing a fund that these payments are being allocated to. That is coming from this particular column here, which is not being displayed. Lastly, we have our column 10 here, which is just our total labels for some nice aggregates. When we're done with setting up this report, of course, we select this build report button, which is signified by that floppy disk icon. And from there, you can preview your report and see how it looks. I recommend, of course, previewing your reports and performing any troubleshooting tasks that you'd like to make sure that the data that you see is nice and clean. And one thing to note is you can always export these reports if you'd like. You'll see this little export tab here in the left menu. If we select that tab here, we can choose if we'd like to have a custom export, a scheduled export here, and we can select the export type. Export file names can be specified here. We can even specify when we'd like to run it. If we'd like to schedule it here, then we can select our frequency, maybe every day, every month, every year, etc. So that's very useful when it comes to actually viewing the data in these reports. You can actually schedule them so you don't have to run them yourselves. And we also have the ability to internet enable these reports as well. So you can just share a link without having to log into the system to view the results of this report. So that was a quick little rundown of disbursement reports. But to show us another type of reports, I will pass on the mic to my colleague, Banky.
Hi, everyone. My name is Banky, and I'm also a member of the Platform Solutions team. And today I'm going to be talking about the payment and forecast reports. You access your list of reports, so the reporting page, by clicking on the menu and then going into the reports under the tools. So going into the payment forecast report, this report is basically useful helping calculating the awarded grant payments for a specific, number of years to help in budget forecasting. And so imagine like you have a bunch of applications that have a total awarded amount and you wanted to see how much you're allocating or for each year. This report would be very useful in that scenario. So if we try to preview our report, you see the list of columns that we've included. We obviously want to know what the name of the application is, the organization the application is under. You can include whether the status of the application, the total awarded amount, and then this first column shows you how much has been previously paid in previous years, and then this shows you how much has been paid in the current year, This column shows you how much is supposed to be paid the following year, and finally, year 3 shows you how much is going to be paid 2 years from now. So for my report that I'm working on, it's only showing you for the next 3 years. Going back into the report builder, we're also using a couple data sets, the list of applications, and a bunch of level 2 activities for the applications as well. The very first column is capturing the field that is the level 1 ID of the applications, and the group options that we're using to group all of these applications is grouping them by their level 1 ID. However, this column is not going to be displayed in the report. Just as a heads up, all of the field names or columns or titles that you're giving your reports do not necessarily have to match the ones in our examples. These are just the ones that we've created for our SmartSimple grants demonstration. The next column is the application name, which we included in the report, pulling it off of the applications list. And then the next column is the organization. The next column is the status of the application. And again, we're only filtering based off of those applications that have been in the or that are in the approved status. The next column is a level 2 activity, which is the type of activity. And then we're selecting only the payment types of activities to be included. However, we're not displaying this column. This checkbox is unchecked. Again, if you wanted to include any of these columns, feel free to do so as well. The next column is a very important one because it's actually going to be taking account of the scheduled payment date, and it's going to be looking at the year field in the date field. And so even if this column is not being included in our report, the next few columns are going to be making reference to this particular piece of information, which is the year of the payment. The next column shows you the total awarded amount for the entire application, which is being pulled up from the application itself. And then these few columns are what actually sums up the amounts that are paid each year. So the very first one is the previously paid amounts, and it's creating a sum total of all of those previously paid payments prior to the current year. And the formula that we're using is if column 6, which is the scheduled payment date column, is equal to the year before this current year, which is year now minus 1, then you add a sum total of all of those payments and put them in that column. The next column says if the scheduled payment date is the current year, then you add all of those payments and put them in this column. The next column says if the scheduled payment date is a year from now, which is this year plus 1, you add all of those payments and put them in that column. And finally, if the scheduled date for those payments is this year plus 2, which is 2 years from now, you add all of those payments and you put them in this final column. So now that we've built out the report, again, I can preview it and show you what it looks like. For this system, I haven't necessarily included so many payments, but this very last application shows you that the sum total of the awarded amount for this particular application is $50,000, and it's been spread out evenly across 4 years. And so the previous year has $12,500 that has been paid towards this application. This year also $12,500 is going to be paid, and then it's calculating the sum total of the next 2 years, which are also $12,500 each. So that's a very quick rundown of the payment forecast report. Another advanced setting that you can also enable regarding the reports is also the ability to connect or to add or include an OData connector, which is kind of useful for exporting your reports into other data visualization programs like Power BI or the likes of like Tableau. And just like my colleague Garrett mentioned, you can always export the reports in however format that you'd like, and you can schedule them as needed. Those were the 2 reports that we wanted to talk about today, and I'm going to pass it on to Sarah.
That was really informative. So we do have a couple questions. For Garrett from Disbursement Reports, how do you set the date range for reports, such as to restrict report data to this current fiscal year or the current quarter if setting up for regular updates?
Sure. So one way would be to include a column for that particular record type and to place a criteria, or excuse me, on the field from that record type, which would include the date, and then to include in the criteria for that particular column to include is within this particular date range. If you'd like to, you can also run a report with a date range filter that is specified before you run the report. So to show you an example of that, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And let's have a look from another demo system of ours. And let's go ahead and preview this report here. So you'll see that before I run this report, I'm actually given this prompt to select a start date and an end date to filter my entire report by. That is actually going to be, once again, of course, configured in the report builder. We are going to include a column for that date, and that date is going to be here. And we can select, of course, the format for the date as well. As you can see, we have year, month, of course, year, month, day, year, et cetera, et cetera. So you can select your preferred format for your date, and then you will include another 2 columns if you have a start and an end date, or just 1 if you just want to be going just by a start date, or actually I believe it would have to be a 2, excuse me. And you would select as your criteria here, you would say greater than for the start date and less than for the end date, and then equals with these 3 question marks, and then you have the ability to select from a prompt when you open up that report. So I know that was 2 answers there. The first was to include a criteria on the column, and then the second was a sort of more advanced solution, which is that you can include a prompt prior to running the report itself.
Awesome, thank you. Can anyone create either types of these reports?
They would have to have access to your reports, and to grant them access to reports. Actually, I'll share my screen again here. To grant someone access to reports, you will go into your global settings. You will go into your security tab. You'll go into your system feature permissions here, and then to your menu tab in system feature permissions. Go ahead and scroll down and you'll see this reports menu access here. So you can go ahead and define which roles have access to reports in the system right here. Of course, system administrators should have access to this, but you can select other roles if you'd like. Of course, keep them internal only, and that's how you can enable roles to have access to reports.
Perfect, thank you. Can you automatically run reports using workflows? And then can you have those reports exported automatically?
I believe so, yep. You can run via a workflow task type, which could trigger a report, if I'm not mistaken. Feel free to correct me if that's wrong. Anyone else on the call here?
The second half was, can you have these reports exported automatically?
Yeah. So I think we touched on that there. The export tab on the left menu of the report is where you can schedule an export if you'd like to schedule one.
Okay, thank you. Currently, that looks like all the questions we have right now. But if anybody does think of a question later on, please feel free to email us at platformsolutions@smartsimple.com. We're always happy to hear from you. And thanks again, Garrett and Banky, for the awesome presentation. To everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a great day.